You have the capacity within you to appreciate the differences in humanity.
We have to personally challenge ourselves to dig into some of those diversities that may be a little bit more uncomfortable to navigate.
That word uncomfortable always sticks with me. If I'm uncomfortable, I'm learning and I'm doing something about it.
And I think all people deserve a place at the table. And if people are being excluded, we just need to make the table bigger.
No matter what your race, color, creed, ethnicity, you should have that right to be able to tell your story and have people listen with an open mind.
That's the kind of leaders we are developing. That's the kind of individuals we're going to invite into our podcast for everyone to hear from.
This is Because People Matter, a podcast about celebrating leaders who are harnessing the gift of human differences, creating inclusion while driving success in their organizations and communities. Hosted by Dr. Helen Fagan, each episode features interviews with individuals who are leading the way. If you're ready to learn the impact becoming inclusive can have in your business, this is the podcast for you.
Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have a unique episode for you this time, and I'm really excited about it. Our team is made up of individuals that I am honored to work alongside. Each of them has unique strengths, unique perspectives, and I really look for that. And so I am honored to call each of these individuals not just friends and colleagues, but sojourners on this journey to becoming inclusive. In this episode, we get to meet the minds, the energy, the passion behind Helen Fagan and Associates. We're not just going to share a little bit about ourselves, but we're also going to tell you why this work is important to us. Why are we doing this? Why do people matter to us? So you're going to get to know a little bit about us, a little bit about our why, a little bit about our approach and our background, some of our stories, really placing the importance on why do we do the work that we do. So without further ado, here's the episode. Well, hey there, Cindy. So tell us a little bit about who you are, something unique and fun about you, and what is your why? That's a question we ask our clients is, what is your why?
All right. I'm Cindy Conger. I'm the chief storyteller here at Helen Fagan and Associates. I grew up in Nebraska, Colorado, and New Mexico and had a lot of different experiences in those places. I ended up in Lincoln, Nebraska to study journalism at the University of Nebraska. Something kind of fun about me is that I love sports. In fact, that's why I came to the University of Nebraska to become a sports writer. I'm a big sports fan, and that legacy was passed down through the women in my family, particularly my grandmother, who was played on a traveling basketball team back in the 1920s in Oklahoma and Texas.
That is so cool. I love it. I love it. So what makes this work important to you?
I was really drawn to our mission statement, to our vision, because people matter. People really do matter. And I think all people deserve a place at the table. And if people are being excluded, we just need to make the table bigger. So personally and professionally, I want to spend my time making bigger tables, building bigger tables where everyone is welcome and welcome to be all of who they are. And for me personally, that really extends to making sure that all my family members and friends who are part of the LGBTQ plus community are always welcome at the table and that there's always a place for them.
I love it. Thank you. That's awesome. Samantha.
So I'm Samantha Gunther, but I prefer to go by Sam. On Helen Fagan and Associates team, I am the chief integrator and a development guide. But a little bit about me. I grew up on a farm in small town Northeast Nebraska. I went to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln for both my bachelor's and master's degrees studying leadership education. And then during my master's program, I had a focus on inclusive leadership. And now I live and work in Omaha, Nebraska. And a fun fact about me is that I used to be really big into art and painting. I used to commission paintings for others and be able to sell them to people, which was a really cool hobby to keep me busy in my meantime.
I remember learning that about you. Yeah, I remember learning that about you when you were in grad school. And I saw a couple of your paintings. They were so cool. All right, Sam, what is your why?
Okay. Growing up throughout my entire life, I have usually taken a leadership role in some capacity. I grew up with a really large extended family with like 35 first cousins. We had organized events, and I was the group leader for everything, trying to lead and guide people to do fun things together. And this carried with me through school and high school, leading organizations and my friends in different capacities. And so when I got to college, I was learning to lead in different ways and explore what my role was in different capacities. And growing up from an agricultural background, I had these different stereotypes also tagged onto me. Some are really good from an agricultural background, but some are also really bad. And so this faced me pretty heavily when I took a trip to South Africa on a study abroad trip in 2017. I went with about 6 other people, and they were of various diversities and cultures. And on this trip, there were some tough battles and some tough conversations. Some assumptions about my culture. I was making assumptions about other cultures. There was a lot of cultural shame coming from all directions. And it was really tough to navigate those situations and know how to communicate, act on my intentions of trying to be inclusive, but not knowing what that looks like. And while it was a really cool experience to be in South Africa, it was also one of the most difficult times to be in South Africa because of some of the conversations and interactions that I was having. And so fast forward, I come back to the United States, and I'm back at the University of Nebraska. And I started taking a course with Dr. Fagan herself. It was an intercultural development course. And during this course, Helen asked at the beginning of the course of, what was something fun that you did over the summer? And, what did it teach you? So I was like, oh, I went to South Africa. Like, this is super cool. No one else in the class is going to have this. This is awesome, right? And then I tell her that, and she's like, okay, but what did you learn? And I was like, well, it was kind of a tough experience. So like, I learned a lot, but like, where do I begin? And little did I know the entire course was going to revolve around intercultural experiences and how to navigate them a little bit better. And so that course ended up being a really monumental shift in why I'm doing this work, because I don't think I would be where I am today without that course and those conversations to help me understand and digest that experience in South Africa and digest my own diversities and perspectives. And so that's what's drawn me into this work. And why I'm continuing to do this work is because leadership has always been a part of who I am as an individual. And if I can use my leadership to do more good in the world and create a more inclusive environment, then I'm doing something right with my life and I'm doing something good for the world. And people have always been at the heart of what I want to be around and do for other people. And so if there's an opportunity for me to create an inclusive environment because people matter, then I'm going to be there and I'm going to do that.
Great. Thank you. I do remember the conversations about your experience in South Africa.
It was a tough conversation, but we made it through.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It was good. All right, Amber.
My name is Amber Dowson, and my title at Helen Fagan and Associates is Controller of Chaos. So I am the Mo to Helen Fagan's Wally. So every time that there is something going on, Helen is off the beaten path and tackling, and I am the one going up behind her and trying to catch all the forms and documents. And I also am client support as well for our Becoming Inclusive membership and journey. My background, I came from business management. So I have about 10 years under my belt, anywhere from service industry up to family entertainment. So running big corporations is kind of my niche. So smaller role here, but feel just as important. Fun fact about me, my husband terrified me upon our first encounter. His voice was so incredibly deep. I was extremely startled by how deep his voice was. And I every time he would approach me or send me, a little love note saying, I like you, I'd be like, no, you don't. No. um, we have a beautiful son together. He will be celebrating his second birthday this summer. And he and I are working on 10 years together, 6 years married. So,
Very cool. It's great. That flew by.
way too quick.
So, what makes this work important to you?
This is important to me because I have a diverse family, in-laws, extended family. We come from all walks of life. I've seen what those individuals have gone through. And growing up with that, I've always wanted to do better. I have read a social media post like a long time ago. I can't even tell you who famously quoted it, but the quote goes, the first thought or reaction that you have is who you were raised to be. The second thought is who you are wanting to be. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that people are different and you need to take a second to just process and understand and just give humans a chance. So I try to live by that, by showing grace, taking a second to process situations and hoping that how I present myself and how I act to situations will hopefully encourage others to do the same, to take a beat and just reflect before speaking out or reacting to something that might not be so comfortable or not familiar because it's not what you have grown up with. Um, so that's why this is important to me. I just want to be able to provide a safe environment for others. And I also want to hopefully encourage others to take that second of pause and just give grace.
So great. Thank you. All right, Scott, you're up.
I'm Scott Fagan, and I've been told my title is Lord of the Left Brain. I grew up in, everywhere. I'm a military brat / wherever my mom wanted to live. I joined the Navy when I was 17, met my wife at the same age. We got married the same year, so I've known her for a long time. I retired from the military in 97, started working for the federal government for the Department of Veteran Affairs, and I've been with them for the past 26 years. Fun fact about me, when I met my wife, I actually asked her sister out first. And we actually hit it off on that date because we double dated, her and my best friend and me and her sister, and kind of left her sister behind. She kind of left my best friend behind, and we had a blast.
That is fun. Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't know how you can hang out with Helen Fagan and not have stuff rub off. I've been around Dr. Fagan, whatever you want to call her, chief troublemaker, almost 41 years. So getting into this world with the things that we had to go through with immigration, just trying to get her a green card and then her citizenship, and her mom and sister went over to Iran. It took us a little over 2 years to get them back. And then working also for the VA, I just look at it as everybody has a story and everybody should be allowed to tell it. No matter what your race, color, creed, ethnicity, doesn't matter who you are. You should have that right to be able to tell your story and have people listen with an open mind and accept you as for who you are. So that's why I'm involved in work like this, is because I want everybody to be able to tell their story and be accepted for who they are.
Great. Thank you. All right, Joshua.
Okay. I'm Joshua Lorimer. I'm the director of Astonishment.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think.
Director of Astonishment.
I love it. It's super exciting. I'm one of the newer members of the team. joining specifically to help produce this podcast. I have a background in post-production. I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And the last, I'd say 3 to 4 have specifically been in podcast production professionally. Fun fact about me, the thing I'm most well known for across the internet is playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends on a podcast. Get together with a bunch of creative, fun, wacky folk, and you improvisationally tell a story. It's books and pencils, and it's really fun.
That's cool.
I
Cool.
feel like my why is pretty simple. I'm a dad. I have 2 little girls, and it's not, you don't have to look very far out your window to see that the need for new voices to be heard is really important. So the last, I said like the last decade or so, I've been uh, doing post-production work and building my skills as a storyteller and an editor and a producer. And I just kind of hit this point as a father where I realized trying to promote my own voice just didn't feel as important right now. And honestly, at this point in my life and my career, I can't think of somebody I would rather help lift up the voice of than Dr. Helen Fagan. So my why is because I really care about uh, what Helen has to say and the stuff that she's putting into the world. And if you're listening, I hope you're listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, I actually started working in human resources, and I like to say pain pushed me into this work, but inspiration is what pulls me. It's a quote that I've adopted as and think about. So I got into this work in, I would say, mid to late 80s and officially in the 90s, sometime in the 90s, and began doing this work. And I grew up in 3 different countries and have lived in 5 states around the United States. A fun fact about me is that when I was a little girl on Harg Island in Iran, I was the person that gave flowers to the Shah and his wife when they visited because of my father's position. So everybody thought I was a cute little girl and all dressed up. I took flowers to them when they got off the airplane. So the story that pushed me into this work was what happened to my dad in a hospital. And for those who have, read the book, Becoming Inclusive, I share that story. And my father was multilingual and he was in charge of export oil for the National Iranian Oil Company. And he was well respected, traveled all over the world, just an incredible man. And he had a stroke that affected his ability to comprehend any language except Farsi. And I happened to be in the room with him one day, and a nurse, because I had to interpret, was training someone, and she got frustrated because of the interpretation and the time it was taking and those things. And she didn't know anything about my dad prior to his stroke. So she was making an assumption, and the assumption was, and what she said to the person she was training, I wish they would learn to speak English. It would make our job so much easier. And I remember all the years by that, this happened in summer of 1991, and I came to the United States in September of 1979. And 2 months after I arrived, the United States hostages were taken in Iran. And so I was loaded up on a bus with other Iranian students at the boarding school that I was at, and we were taken to the airport. And so for being interrogated and then coming back and dealing with all the hate, the anger and all the things. And as a 15-year-old by myself, without family, in a country, it was just a scary time. And so in order to survive, I learned that I need to not admit to being Iranian. So I quickly became wherever people thought I was from. And when people would say negative things, I would just smile and, I would just say, I'm going to survive this. I'm getting smarter, stronger. And I would just, just not say anything. So that kind of became my go-to mechanism from 1979 to 1991 was to just smile and nod and not say anything. And when that nurse said that, it was like a dagger in my heart, and I just lost it. I tell people I didn't assault her, I didn't hit her, but I did verbally assault her. I said some awful things to her, and that was the pain that pushed me into this work. I walked away and I worked in the corporate human resource offices of a company that owned 16 hospitals at the time. And I reported to the vice president of human resources, and I was lamenting to her about this experience. And she said, Helen, you're an intelligent woman. Why don't you go back to school and do something about it? And that was the first time I thought of myself as intelligent, because learning another language, moving from one culture to another, I never thought of myself as smart. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, I'm smart. I'm intelligent. I can do this. So then when we moved to Nebraska, I went back to school and I did something about it. So that's what pushed me into this work. But what really the inspiration that pulls me along is, my husband's a disabled veteran. I want to create a space where disabled veterans are valued and given the opportunity to succeed. My daughter-in-law is from El Salvador. I want to create a space where who she is cherished and valued. I have a grandson who has autism. I want to create a space where individuals who are neurodivergent are given the opportunity to live and succeed. We have a son who was diagnosed with epilepsy, and he has terrible seizures. And so I want him to be able to contribute and be a father and successful in his work. So that's the inspiration that pulls me to continue to do this work. I truly believe people matter, and that's why I do this work.
Do you feel like it's easier to understand the purpose of this work if your lived experience is incorporating a bunch of different cultures or groups or neurodivergence? When you're talking, you gave multiple examples of people you want to make room for. I come from probably the most typical suburban white evangelical background you can imagine. And so I didn't start really experiencing, or even not experiencing, I think tuning into the different experiences that people have had, even in my communities, till I was older, unfortunately. I'm curious, this is maybe not the right place for it, but I'm just curious if someone's listening, how do you communicate the value of this work to someone who maybe doesn't have that immediate touchstone?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And a lot of people have those touchstones. They're just not on the immediate forefront of their minds. So what we want to do is to create space for people to explore. And I don't believe you have to have lived through marginalization in order to have this work be important to you. I think, you really have to be the kind of person who sees value in human differences. If you can stand back and look at a field of flowers where there's like a bunch of different kinds of flowers and you say, oh, that's just so beautiful. Or you're standing on a mountain and you're looking and you see all these different, topography and things, and you can appreciate the beauty of the differences in that. You have the capacity within you to appreciate the differences in humanity. We just have not been raised to pause and do that. We've been raised, I believe, whether it's our academic environments, educational, family, religious, whatever it is, I think there's this sameness. Look for the sameness. And part of that is the neuroscience of it, right? Our brain looks for people who are like us because it's easy and comfortable. But I think what we want to do is cultivate this idea that human beings are the most complex beings on this planet, and that diversity of experience, background, life, perspective, all of those things are to be cherished. And that I think everyone can wrap their mind around.
This is something that I talk about a lot with people when I am doing like IDI consultations with them as a IDI administrator, because oftentimes people will say to me, well, everyone around me looks the same and talks the same, etc. We're of the same culture. And I like to challenge them back to say, maybe at a macro level, yes, we might look the same, talk the same, but there's also a lot of micro differences and diversities within each of us that still make each of us unique and operate different and have different backgrounds and histories. And when we continue to put ourselves around people who are always the same as us, we're not opening our minds to see those other diversities. So we have to personally challenge ourselves to explore beyond our personal close network to see the beauty around us and be able to dig into some of those diversities that may be a little bit more uncomfortable to navigate.
That word uncomfortable, I feel, is what has driven and is a driving force within me and others, is being in an environment and hearing things that are so different to the way that you were raised. I would say that I kind of grew up in like a semi-closed minded situation. And just hearing some things that just, sometimes were just unsettling and getting uncomfortable with it. But also, like I said earlier, taking that beat and thinking differently and looking for those differences and seeing why it is a beautiful difference and not something to be fearful of, essentially. So that word uncomfortable always sticks with me. If I'm uncomfortable, I'm learning and I'm doing something about it.
Josh, I know you said that you're a dad with smaller children. And I just want to say, I learned so much from my kids because they just naturally seem to embrace an expansive idea of inclusivity and love. And I was really pushed out of my comfort zone, my comfort with sameness and being, in a comfortable environment by my kids as they grew up. And they brought more diverse people into my life. And, so they have been my teachers.
I love that because I do feel like as we raise our children, they're raising us.
I think it's important to note, I'm speaking from me coming from an agricultural background in a small town. I grew up with many people who were all very similar to me, and it was lots of sameness around me. And I think it's important to note that just because you grew up that way doesn't mean that you have to fall into or align with that stereotype of not being able to be inclusive or not having diversities, because that could be a mental block for you. But this work is important to everyone. This is, growing to become emotionally intelligent and culturally competent. It's much more than just having the lived experience in order to make you qualified.
Interesting thing. We were talking about discomfort. So a seed that is planted, a tree, is both phototropic and gravitropic. And what that means is that it's growing in two directions at the same time. Phototropic growing up towards light, and gravitropic is growing down, those roots growing downward. And so it has to go through a level of discomfort to break out of the shell and in order to be able to grow and expand in multiple ways. And in our work with, attributes of inclusive leaders, we always use a tree metaphor to explain what will happen as you're growing to become an inclusive leader. And I like the aspen trees because aspens are like one living organism. You plant one aspen, pretty soon you're going to have a huge clump of forests of aspens over the years. And that's what inclusive leaders do. They use that, those root systems to grow and develop others and give them opportunity to rise up and be who they truly are. So inclusive leaders create spaces where people can just blossom to the fullness of who they are. And when you have an inclusive leader at the helm, I always say leaders set the tone that others follow. When you have an inclusive leader at the helm, you begin to innovate and create and do things that seemed almost impossible in the past, but are truly within our reach in the present moment. And that is just so exciting. So that's the kind of leaders we are developing. That's the kind of individuals we're going to invite into our podcast for everyone to hear from.
This has been Because People Matter, a podcast about celebrating leaders who are harnessing the gift of human differences, creating inclusion while driving success in their organizations and communities. You can find links to any resources mentioned in today's show notes. Because People Matter is brought to you by Helen Fagan and Associates. We are changing the world one inclusive leader at a time. Go to helenfagan.com to learn more about what we can do for your organization. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you for listening.